Several breaking stories as we come on the air. The stock market free fall, the Dow losing more than 2,000 points today. President Trump responding tonight. Also breaking, there are reports of 3 tornadoes on the ground in the last hour. Dangerous storms moving in tonight, multiple states. And the beloved priest shot and killed at the church. First tonight, U.S. stock markets plunging for the second day in a row. The Dow dropping more than 2,000 points. Only the 4th time in history we've seen this. Millions of Americans worried about higher prices now and their 401ks. And tonight, China now retaliating after President Trump's tariffs. Democratic leaders fuming. The president was on the golf course today, and what he said about all of this. Also tonight, breaking news, reports of those tornadoes on the ground. The storms moving in tonight across several states. Lee Goldberg standing by live with the forecast. And the states of emergency already tonight. A 9-year-old boy swept away walking to the bus. Tonight, actor and comedian Russell Brand facing multiple charges of sex assault involving several women. His response right here tonight. Here in the U.S., that beloved priest shot and killed outside the church rectory. What we're learning about the suspect now under arrest. The 24-year-old American bull rider killed in a horrific rodeo accident in front of thousands of people. What his father told us late today. In Washington tonight, a federal judge giving the Trump administration until Monday night to return an immigrant mistakenly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. The judge saying it was illegal to do so. The breaking news tonight involving the future of TikTok. The CEO accused of choking a man on a cruise ship. What led to the alleged attack? Honoring their father, actor Val Kilmer's children just out tonight with a statement after all of the support this week. What they're now saying about their father. And the American dad who suffered from the same condition as Bruce Willis. Tonight, what his son is now doing in honor of his father, who is our person of the week. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York.
Good morning. Trump's tariffs take effect.
A wave of economic anxiety grips the global stock markets as banks warn of a 60% chance of a global recession.
But rumours swirl the Prime Minister hopes a meeting between President Trump and the King can help secure a trade. So is there still hope for Britain?
King Charles is forced to deny involvement with a Chinese spy after being dragged into the Prince Andrew scandal.
The comedian Russell Brand charged with rape and sexual assault following an investigation by the Metropolitan Police.
And de Macron, the French president's aides claim his fragrance is overpowering. We'll be speaking to a perfumer to find out how to apply cologne to avoid a stink.
And as Michael Fabricant, Daley Thompson and some other famous faces prepare to head to the Big Brother house, we're asking, is the show still relevant?
Good morning, it's Grand National Day and we'll have all the build-up live from Aintree throughout the morning.
It's a chilly start here at Aintree, but as the sun rises, we're racing towards another Grand National.
Indeed, elsewhere, one of the best midfielders ever to play in this country. That's how Pep Guardiola reflected on Kevin De Bruyne's decade of service with Manchester City after the Belgian announced he'll be leaving the club this summer.
It's going to be a beautiful weekend for many of us, but with big contrasts in temperature from east to west. I'll have the latest news on the spring sunshine. Come back to the forecast very soon.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dix.
And I'm Nana Acquia, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Me now, Jim Farley, President and CEO of the great Ford Motor Company. Jim, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Now, we're seeing a difference in how automakers are responding to these tariffs. GM told Fox Business it's ramping up production in the U.S., several hundred temporary workers. Stellantis, though, laying off 900. Which way is Ford going?
Well, thank you, Laura, for having me on. First of all, we build more vehicles in the U.S. than any other brand. We export more, and we have more factory workers. So we never left the U.S. And our plan is really simple, to offer employee pricing, basically the price I pay or anyone at the company pays for all Americans. We believe this is a moment for Ford to differentiate itself, for us to really highlight the American car industry at a moment when it's being discussed in media like yourself, Laura. and we think this is our opportunity to gain some business.
Jim, the Chinese auto company BYD is dominating the market now in Australia, one of our strong allies. So President Trump is obviously very annoyed by the fact that our cars don't get into the markets, even in countries that are our allies, military allies, economic partners. So will these tariffs, in your view, help make that situation more competitive abroad for Ford?
Well, we're really thrilled to engage in the White House in a serious discussion about fair trade. And the Chinese are now the largest exporter of automobiles in our industry. And this is a very recent phenomenon. For example, over 20% of the vehicles sold in Mexico are built in China. So this is an incredibly important topic. We're very grateful for the president's leadership and the chance to work with his administration to compete on a fair playing field, which these tariffs, especially those coming from China and also other trading partners, as you mentioned, to really put us on an equal footing so we can compete on a whole market in a fair way.
I know, Jim.
On this Friday night, pandemic parallels. Trump's trade war triggers market mayhem not seen since the COVID outbreak.
President Trump has done what only a virus could previously do.
The warnings of what's ahead. The economists and world leaders stumped by Trump.
That formula is a formula that would have been laughed at in high school.
And how it's the butt of late night comedy.
Who's ready to learn how to make their own iPad from scratch?
The Liberals plan to beef up the CBC, while Mark Carney says the public broadcaster needs more money, in stark contrast to the Conservatives' goal. And time's not up yet. The new deadline for TikTok to find an American owner or else.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The global trade war is escalating tonight between the world's two largest economies. China is striking back at the U.S. with matching 34% tariffs on all imports from America. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump unveiled steep 34% tariffs on all Chinese goods imported into the U.S. Since then, stock markets around the world have plunged. The Nasdaq alone fell more than 20% from its record high in December. The price of oil also took a hit, sliding to its lowest level since 2001, and it brought down Canadian energy stocks. We'll get more on that in a moment, but we begin with Jackson Prosco and the move that's fueling fears of a global recession.
The market free fall accelerated as China struck back at U.S. tariffs with a reciprocal 34% duty on American-made products. Instead of changing course, President Donald Trump spent the day on the golf course, leaving it to his cabinet to play defense.
The markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade.
So dramatic, the chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve warned the fallout would be significantly worse than expected.
We face a highly uncertain outlook with elevated risks of both higher unemployment and higher inflation.
The Economic Policy Uncertainty Index, a measure of financial worry, hit levels not seen since the COVID pandemic. What does this tell us about how people are feeling about the economy right now?
This is a moment of utter chaos. President Trump has done what only a virus could previously do, which is impose those levels of fear and uncertainty all around the world.
Where's the bottom? How will we know where the bottom is? And how does this play out if we keep seeing countries retaliate against these U.S. measures?
That's the point. We don't know where the bottom is. This is not a well-articulated strategy, and as far as I can tell, doesn't really get us very far.
Trump Thursday insisted...
Hello, very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, US President Donald Trump's sweeping worldwide tariffs come into force across the globe. And England moved top of their Women's Nations League group with a comfortable victory over Belgium last night. It's Saturday, the 5th of April. Global stock markets fall, but Donald Trump insists that businesses aren't worried because the tariffs are here to stay. Keir Starmer prepares to discuss the tariffs with world leaders after the FTSE 100 suffered its worst day since the start of the pandemic. Also ahead, Russell Brand breaks his silence and claims he's innocent after being charged with rape and sexual assault. Love for the Who reigns as quadrophenia is reimagined through the world of ballet. We'll bring you a first look. And in sport this morning, Lando Norris is currently set for pole at the Japanese Grand Prix as grass fires around the Suzuka circuit continue to cause concern. Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show. So it's the day that countries across the world have been bracing for. Donald Trump's trade tariffs have officially come into effect. The global markets have plummeted, with many recording their worst week since the start of the pandemic. In the early hours of this morning, the US president insisted that big businesses aren't worried about the tariffs because, in his words, they know they're here to stay. But countries around the world are scrambling, with many preparing to implement tariffs of their own. Our US correspondent David Blevins begins our coverage from Washington.
Today, both Labor and Liberal parties promise to return the Port of Darwin to Australian ownership if they win the May election.
This is an important national economic asset.
Meanwhile, on the campaign trail, Peter Dutton's footy photo op goes astray.
I'm going to do two things. One, I thought that I could buy him a beer this afternoon. And the second, I'm going to teach him how to mark.
Global stock markets plummet after China fires back in a tariff trade war with the US. Tony Mockbell awakes to his first day of freedom after 18 years in custody.
The cross took a little touch, it's no goal, yes!
And the Matildas defeat South Korea 1-0 at the Sydney Football Stadium. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Melissa McCabe. Anthony Albanese says he's made a political decision that the Port of Darwin should be returned to Australian ownership. Peter Dutton has committed to returning the port to Australian hands within 6 months if elected, but Anthony Albanese isn't putting a time frame on it. Political reporter Tom Lowry is travelling with the Prime Minister in Queensland.
It is an interesting sort of development over the past 24 hours. The Prime Minister made a hint a few days ago that he had something looming on the Port of Darwin, but he made a surprising phone call into ABC Radio Darwin to confirm late yesterday that an Albanese government, if re-elected, would seek to return the Port of Darwin to Australian ownership. It's currently on a 99-year lease to Landbridge, a Chinese firm with significant ties.
Asia.
Headline news this hour. US President Donald Trump's 10% global tariffs have taken effect, subjecting nearly every nation and most imports to new duties. Higher rates will apply on April 9th for other countries targeted by the White House. The escalating trade war stoking fears of a recession.
It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
The US leader has extended a deadline to sell or ban TikTok, saying a deal is close and he doesn't want the app to go dark. China-based firm ByteDance says differences remain on many key issues, adding any agreement will be subject to approval under Chinese law. In a deadly landslide in Indonesia, at least 10 bodies have been recovered after part of a mountainside crashed onto passing vehicles. And that's the latest from the CNN newsroom.
You're getting the latest news here on Daybreak with me, Peter O'Brien. These are the headlines. The first of Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs come into effect, with all US imports now taxed at 10% as markets continue to plunge. Hundreds of thousands of people could turn out to protest Trump this Saturday as senators pass a budget blueprint to execute his reforms. And a Russian strike kills children in Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, while Washington promises ceasefire talks with Moscow will not be endless. As of midnight this Saturday, Washington time, all imports to the US are now charged 10% tax, the baseline tariff announced by Donald Trump on his Liberation Day, with additional tariffs for many countries coming next Wednesday. The closing bell on Wall Street confirmed its worst week in 5 years, with the Dow, the S&P and Nasdaq all down between 5.5% and 6% on Friday. Even some Republicans have expressed concerns, but that didn't prevent senators from passing a budget blueprint to carry out Trump's various reforms. And the market has spoken. Those were the words of the Chinese foreign minister after Trump piled criticism on Beijing's retaliation of a 34% tariff on all US goods. Economists predict the trade war will lead to higher inflation and slower growth, with the Federal Reserve planning to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at around 4.3% for now. And that's not what Trump wants.
With global shares tumbling and Wall Street experiencing crushing losses, the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell chimed in to confirm that the situation was indeed uncertain. His goal, he says, is to avoid an ongoing inflation problem.
While uncertainty remains elevated, it is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Besides,
Tonight, Wall Street in turmoil. $5 trillion gone in just 2 days. The Dow drops 2,200 points, the worst week since 2020. China hits back hard, 34% tariffs after President Trump targeting nearly every country we trade with. Fed Chair Jerome Powell warns of high prices and weaker growth. JP Morgan now warning over a recession. What's the White House's next move? As American consumers wonder what to do, companies make tough choices. The Nintendo Switch pre-orders postponed. And the impact on everything from coffee beans to washing machines. First tornadoes, now floods, with 8 dead in storms and floodwater is rising. A 9-year-old boy tragically swept away. Al Roker tracking the next wave. Actor, comedian, provocateur Russell Brand charged with rape and sexual assault. His denial at what he's accused of doing. The father deported to an El Salvador prison, even though his family says he's not a gang member. What a judge ordered the Trump administration to do. The timeshare dispute that landed a Michigan family in a prison in Mexico. Now they're out. How it happened and what they're telling us about the ordeal.
Good evening, I'm Amna Navaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the News Hour tonight, the global economy is stressed further as China hits back against the U.S. with more tariffs of its own.
The president removes more top national security officials, drawing praise from far-right conspiracy theorist and Trump ally Laura Loomer.
And how one of the nation's preeminent art centers in Washington, D.C. has been pushed into the larger partisan divide.
I think the example set at the Kennedy Center will have a chilling effect on other organizations all across the country.
Africa News. The news. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni on Thursday held talks with his South Sudanese counterpart as tensions continue to rise in the East African country. 7 landed in Juba on the back of warnings that a civil war may be imminent. South Sudan's foreign minister addressed the press after the meeting.
We briefed the president, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and the accompanying delegation about the security situation in South Sudan and the status of implementation of peace agreement, and we assure them that South Sudan government, we are very committed for the implementation of the security arrangement.
Last week, Vice President Riek Machar was arrested in a major escalation. Uganda has deployed forces to protect President Salva Kiir.
We had a cordial meeting touching on issues between our two governments, which are mutual benefits between the two governments. We touched on the topic of peace and security between our two states, but also in the region.
The latest tensions stem from fighting in the country's north between government forces and a rebel militia known as the White Army, that's widely believed to be allied with Machar.
An official in U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is in talks with the Democratic Republic of Congo about developing its mineral resources. Without providing any further details, his senior advisor for Africa, Masad Boulos, said the potential deal could involve multi-billion-dollar investments. Boulos met with DRC President Felix Tshisekedi in Kinshasa on Thursday in speculation of a possible minerals for security deal. The Congo is the world's largest producer of cobalt, a mineral used to make lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles and smartphones. It also has substantial gold, diamond, and copper reserves. The country is facing an insurgency by Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in the east, where many of the minerals are found. The region faces a dire humanitarian crisis, with the displacement of more than 7 million people and a record number facing acute hunger. The president says the US deal could make his country safer.
A Kremlin envoy told reporters after his talks in Washington that he discussed normalizing Russia-US ties in meetings with members of President Donald Trump's administration. We have also discussed economic and investment questions. We see that American companies want to come back to Russia and take the niche left by European companies. What makes the Trump administration different is that they hear Russia's position on concerns, unlike the Biden administration. Of course, there is disagreement on various topics, but there is a process and dialogue that will help to overcome these disagreements. Dmitry have noted that the restoration of direct flights between Russia and the United States was among the issues that were discussed.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Have a good life. Bye-bye.